couple friends of mine were getting stars on the Walk of Fame. And when Julia Louis-Dreyfus got hers, I went and I was part of the presentation for her. And I came home and my boys, I guess they were young teenagers at the point, and they said, "Hey, Dad, do you have one of those?" I went, "Nope, nope." And they said, "Don't you want one?" I said, "Well, I never really thought about it." I said, "But guys, I could walk you up there, and we'll walk down block after block after block, and every one of those people were famous. At the moment that star got laid in the sidewalk, they were famous. And I guarantee you won't know every 9 out of 10. You will not know. Fame is a very fleeting thing." I said, "When I am gone, there are only 2 people in the world who I care how they remember me and if they remember me, and I'm looking at both of them. And I don't need a star on a sidewalk for you guys to know who I am."
What's doing, everybody? I'm Alec Lace. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. Today's guest on the podcast is Jason Alexander. Jason is well known for portraying George Costanza in the smash hit sitcom comedy series Seinfeld. He is also a Tony Award-winning Broadway actor. It's a big honor to have him on the podcast today. So get down here, smack the subscribe button, tap that like, and let's jump into it right now with Jason Alexander on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, First Class Father, Jason Alexander. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Listen, I gotta be very honest. I'm not like a big podcast guy. I don't know from podcasts. The sound of this show is just gorgeous. Congratulations to you. It's just a beautiful thing to be doing.
Well, thank you, Jason. Hey, listen, it's an honor to have you here. Let's start right like this. How many kids do you have, and how old are they?
I have 2 boys. Gabe is 29. Noah is 25.
Wow, very cool. What kind of sports or activities were they into growing up?
Much like their father, virtually none. They actually, that's not true. I undercredit them. They were not team sports guys. They were into a little bit of martial arts, which I was into, and then they got kind of heavily into. When I say gymnastics, you're picturing the Olympics, but it's sort of like Cirque du Soleil gymnastics. They had, the silks, and they had a trampoline, and they had they got very serious about the trampoline. They were very good for a while. So they did that kind of stuff, but they were not. You would not want me or any of my children on a basketball or a football team. We just would not be of help to you at all.
Very cool. Hey, Jason, if you could please just take a minute here to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Well, very good question. I am, I guess I'm known as an actor, director, producer, writer. I've been performing professionally since I was 14 years old. I've done Broadway and theater across the country as an actor and a director. I've been in a bunch of movies, some of which you've heard of, like Pretty Woman and Shallow Hal, and I'm probably best known as George Costanza from the Seinfeld television series, a television icon from the 90s. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, look, I'm a big fan of the show, so I've always loved watching you over the years here. So take us back to the beginning of your fatherhood journey here then, Jason. About how old were you when you first became a dad, and how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective on life?
I was 32 when Gabe was born. My wife and I had 5 years, and I know she's okay with me talking about this. My wife and I had 5 years of unexplainable infertility, where we saw a number of specialists, and every report seemed to be, "You guys are fine. We don't know why this isn't happening." And eventually we went to an amazing fertility doctor who just sort of helped the process a little bit. But both my boys are in vitro, so they were both fought for very hard to get here. And my older son, Gabe, gave us a really interesting entrance into life because he was born with some sort of bronchial infection, which we can look at now, 29 years later, and go, that was nothing. I mean, come on. But at the time, it put him in the neonatal intensive care unit for the first 10 days of his life. And, it is an amazing thing. I've never had a suicidal thought in my life. Not one, Alec. But I remember going into the little chapel in Cedars-Sinai Hospital and, communing with God and going, please don't do this, because if you take one, you're going to take 2. I cannot get through this. And what's amazing about that is, unless you believe in things like reincarnation, this little person is a stranger to me. I've known him for an hour when that event happened. And you go, wow, I am not the person I was an hour before that moment. And so the changes are profound. I think anybody who's had a child, male or female, knows you are not the same person a minute after they show up. Your heart lives outside your body. You are trying to make decisions for more than one person at a time and trying to do everything you can not to make your own way through the world, but to provide a way for that little person you brought into it. And it just changes everything.
Yeah, very well said, Jason. Yeah, what an introduction into fatherhood for you. My wife and I, we have 4 kids, and we went through several miscarriages along the way. And so I know sometimes, it's not just a 1, 2, 3 thing and it happens. So for a lot of people like yourself, it can take a while. So what would you say then, Jason? What would you consider to be the top values that you had hoped to instill in your boys growing up, and how did that play out as they became adults?
Well, you try and instill the values that you want to have yourself, and if you're going to be totally honest, I miss the mark sometimes, but maybe they can do better. We tried to give them an awareness first and foremost that they live a very blessed life. The fact that they have two parents that are living in the same home, that they are part of that kind of what is considered old school family, that they were born into some privilege, that their dad is a public figure who has made a very good living, and that they don't live the way most people do. I was born into a solid middle class, working class family. My sons were born into something quite different. And to make them aware of that, grateful for it, but also to understand and be able to connect with and not make assumptions about people who were not born into those circumstances. Honesty was a big part of it. We used to say to our boys all the time, we expect you to make mistakes. We expect you to screw up. That's how you learn. Don't lie to us about it, because we can't help you. And we're not saying that, there be no consequences for messing up. There can be consequences. But I promise you, the consequences for lying to us about it will be far worse than if you just... So, listen, I can't swear that my boys never got away with one behind our backs, but for the most part, I think they're very honest guys, more so than I am, for sure. They have integrity. They have compassion. Their hearts are open to all kinds of people. They do not walk around. I don't think there's a discriminatory bone in their body. They generally are very accepting of all kinds of people and different ways of thought and different lifestyles. They have a good work ethic. They want to make their way in this world. They have things they're passionate about and that they pursue. And they are good, kind, loving men. And I don't know what more we could have asked for. And I give most of the credit for all of that to my wife.
Hey, really good stuff, Jason. And you mentioned there with the 2-parent household, I talk a lot on this show about the fatherless crisis that we do have going on in our country. We got so many kids that are growing up without a father or a father figure in their life, and it's really having a devastating effect on our society. And one of those things that's missing in that type of relationship is the discipline portion of it. I was a guy that grew up just waiting till your father comes home, and that was enough to straighten me out a lot of the time. So what type of disciplinarian were you with the kids growing up, Jason? And is that different than the discipline style that you grew up with?
Actually, not very. It wasn't very different. My parents were actually one generation older than most of my contemporaries' parents. I came along when my dad was 50 years old and my mom was 40 years old. And in 1959, that was very unusual. So you would have expected that they would be sort of the discipline was at the end of a belt kind of thing. But I was never really physically disciplined as a child. My punishments, as it were things, like being deprived of, an event. You don't get to go to that party kind of thing, or being grounded, or being sent to my room, or the one that hurt the most is my parents would sometimes freeze me out. I'd get the silent treatment because I had hurt them so badly. And, a day or two of that and you're on your knees groveling, going, oh, I'm sorry. With our kids, certainly we don't believe in any kind of physical punishment. All I think that teaches a child is that I can hurt them. And A, I don't want them to think that lesson, and B, it won't always be true. And I don't want it coming back on me. We actually probably over-talked in our family. We would explain things. We would say, well, here's what happened. Here was what your responsibility in it was. That's not something we can support. So let's discuss how we can keep that from happening again. And it may mean, in order for you to really understand this, you have to sacrifice something. And it may be television, it may be a game, it may be an opportunity with your friends, it may be this, it may be that. But, it was, they were never punished in a vacuum. They were always disciplined in a way that had love attached to it and had meaning and explanation attached to it. And that was true even when my wife and I did a really interesting parenting philosophy that was taught out here called Research Infant Educators. And there's a lot of talking. Even when your kids are infants. I mean, we used to have people come over and they would go, "You got to be kidding me." Where, one of the it's called RIE. One of the RIE principles are, you assume your baby can be more interactive than we think they are capable of. So you would never just put a baby on a changing table and put an outfit on them. That's what an insult. Right? So you would hold up 2 outfits and you go, "Hi, Gabe, this is the blue outfit and this is the green outfit. Which one would you like to wear?" And if you wait there for a minute, they're just in space, but they'll eventually focus their eyes on one of them for a second and you go, "Oh, you seem to be looking at the green outfit. Okay, let's put on the green." And so, they were participatory in their own lives. And we followed that out by assuming they could participate and negotiate with us, even if it was to something corrective or something that they had to be punished for. So it was always in dialogue. And, as a result of that, there's a lot of talking in my house. There's a lot of talk. My younger son is now monosyllabic. He's like, "Look, I got it. Just grunt. Yes, no. Can I do this? Up, down, in, but yet he's a writer. So words, he loves words. So, that was our system. And they came out great. They're great.
Sometimes I got to catch myself. I got 2 teenage boys, and sometimes I'll catch myself in the middle of one of these big Plato Republic monologues that I'm giving them, and then I realize, wait a minute, I got to tone it down a bit here. I'm getting it a little too deep sometimes.
Yeah,
but listen, Jason, I'm just like you. My father had me when he was 50 years old. He was born in 1930. My mother was 43. Well, when she had me, so I grew up with all the old movies, all the old.
Yeah.
My father was actually a stand-in singer for Eddie Fisher back in the day.
Wow.
So I kind of grew up in all of that, and my parents were a lot older than my kids. One of the things that was the downfall of that was both my parents passed away before I became a father myself. So because you had, your parents had you later in life, were your parents around for when you first had your kids? Were they there throughout your kids' childhood?
They really were. My wife and I both lost our dads 6 weeks apart from each other, and it was when my older son was 10 years old, so 10 and 6. So the boys never really got to know their grandfathers all as well as we would like to. But the grandmas were around. My wife's mother, lives blocks from us. My mom lived in Florida, so there were a couple of trips every year to go see Grandma Ruth. But yeah, they had a pretty good exposure to them. The hard part with my mom is, again, because she came from a different generation and she was so much older than their contemporary grandparents. She didn't quite know how to relate to these kids on a level that was meaningful to them. She believed the way to bond with them was to tell them the stories about her. And they were good about that for the first 30 minutes, but and then she would say, "I have so much trouble communicating with them." And I would say, "Well, Mom, maybe you should ask them about them." And that was when I was a kid. You only told your grandparents what your parents said. Tell Grandma about what you did at school. That was it. But you didn't try and inform your grandparents about who you were. And so that communication, my grandparents and we had a very kind of formal relationship. They didn't go to their graves with me kind of having a true bond, except for one of them. But my wife's mother, I think, because she's here, because she's close, she has a lot more of a relationship with them. My mom, had a lovely relationship with them, and they adored her, but just time and distance and generation,
Yeah, it reminds me of one of those principles from Dale Carnegie and How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you talk to other people about themselves, they'll listen all day long, So That's what that reminds me of. And now you say your oldest 29. That puts him right at the beginning. Seinfeld, I know, started in the early 90s there, about 30 years ago. So what? You were a new dad then while this was going on. What were some of the challenges of becoming famous, Seinfeld taking off while being a new dad?
The only challenge, honestly, because Seinfeld, a four-camera sitcom, especially a successful one, is a great parenting schedule because my work week was usually 4 days only. And it was a pretty regular schedule. You knew you were going to have your weekends, and you knew where your vacations were, and you knew when it was kind of like being a school teacher. You knew when your downtime was. And it was the most unactor-like job as far as scheduling. It was a good dad schedule. The only thing that was particularly challenging is because as the popularity of the show grew and I became a little more of a celebrity, we didn't want the kids to be forced into that exposure. And so when we were with our kids or when we were traveling with the kids, that wasn't necessarily a stop sign for the paparazzi and people who wanted to come up and take a picture or whatever, get an autograph, whatever it might be. So navigating, being able to go to a group of paparazzi who have been very decent with me, I have to say, and say, guys, take all the pictures you want of me. If you get the back of their head, we're good. Please don't put their faces out in your photographs. They didn't ask for this life. We have to take them out in public. Could you help us a little bit? And for the most part, they would. And I have to say, for the most part, people would come up, and they were very excited. And I'd go, I'd love to talk to you, but it's just, I'm on dad time right now. And they go, got it, man, got it. And most people got it. So, but it was that extra layer of thinking and precautions about don't put your kids in the public space unless they want to be or ask to be. And that was figuring out how to manage that took some time.
Yeah, and what a difference it is today, Jason, where obviously TikTok and social media has really just made that a lot more harder for these guys that are coming up today. And one of the cool things about watching Seinfeld is like one of those last type of shows where not everybody has a phone in the show. Everyone's not, texting one another,
right,
which obviously has changed big time now. So what kind of advice do you have here, Jason, for the parents that have kids that are looking to break into the industry today? They want to become actors, entertainers. I know everything's changed the way we consume media, the way we record it. So what kind of advice do you have for the parents? How do they steer the kids that are interested?
Well, there's different levels of what we call interested, Alex. So if your kid is into the arts, be it a performer or, a musician or a painter or whatever they might be, there's nothing but support. Go. Try to, especially if they're performing, try and help them understand there's a difference between performing from passion and joy and the love of doing it and the idea of becoming a star or making your living doing it. They're very different things. And you really want to make sure that the first comes before the latter. You want them to be in the school shows. You want them to do community theater. But when my 12-year-old, my 11-year-old said, Dad, I really want to do this. I want to get an agent. And we said, I'll tell you what, when you're 17 and 18, you can decide if you still want to do this. I'll do everything I can to help you. Right now, you just be a kid and you be a student and you do this stuff because you love to do it and you get better and better at it. And if you still want to do it 5 years from now, I'm with you, brother. I'll support you all the way because you're really good. That's part 2, by the way. So some parents come to me and they go, well, should I be a realist or should I just be support? And I always say, the world will do its thing to your children's dreams. They'll either support it or they'll redirect it or they'll squash them. You never want to be the thing that squashes your child's dreams. So even if you go, Jesus, I don't think they're very good, if that's what you're thinking, and they come to you and they go, Mom, Dad, how was I? Your job is to go, sweetheart, you are my child. I'm not a good judge. Everything you do brings me joy. I think you're brilliant. I think you shine. You're my kid. I couldn't see you in any other way. So if you're asking, how do I think you did? I think you did great. If you want to know how the audience thought you did, you got to go ask the audience. That's the most real you can be. Other than that, your job is to go get them. I'm with you all the way. because the last thing you want is for your adult child to turn around and go, yeah, my dad or my mom didn't really support me in this dream.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, very, very well said, Jason. Yeah, there's no shortage of people that are willing to tell you how it is now, especially on Twitter and all these other things. So they'll let you know pretty quickly.
You bet.
And obviously, I know you had the successful book there, Dad, Are You the Tooth Fairy? What was the genesis of you coming up with that book? I know that was early on there, too, or in the early 2000s, I believe. So what was the genesis of that book, and what were the type of books that you read to your kids, bedtime and stuff like that?
Oh, well, we ran the gamut from, Goodnight Moon, when they were really little, and The Hungry Caterpillar and all that stuff. We had a great time. We did like a double dose during the Harry Potter books. So we would buy the books as read by Jim Dale, who was brilliant. It was such a great family experience to listen to those books together. But of course, Dad being an actor, I would also, I think I read good amounts of all those books, trying to do the characters and trying to make it, an award-winning performance for the kids. The book I wrote, Dad, Are You the Tooth Fairy, is absolutely page by page a true story. It was when my son Gabe, so I did a friend of mine made these little envelopes that were specifically for when your kid lost a tooth. It was a beautiful graphic design of a fairy on the outside, and it was just a big enough thing that they could put a tooth in and you could put money in, or whatever you wanted to put in. So I, of course, schmaltzed it up by writing little notes, and I created this sort of interesting font of my own handwriting. And Gabe's tooth fairy, I believe, was Gwyneth, and Noah's tooth fairy was Lilith. And Gwyneth would leave Gabe little notes, and along with his little gifts, and he loved it. I mean, he just loved it. But he was about 8 or 9, or however old you are when you're really losing teeth. And, he came back, and he had a loose tooth, and he came back from school, and somebody got to him. Somebody said, there's no Santa Claus, there's no tooth fairy, it's your parents. And he came into the kitchen, and he gave me an ultimatum. He looked at me, with that little 10-year-old finger. He went, Dad, I want the absolute honest truth. Is it you, or do I have a tooth fairy named Gwyneth? And I'm stuck because my child is asking me for the truth, so I'm now obligated to give him the truth. But I also know that the truth in its coldness is going to hurt his heart. So you go, what do you do? What do you do? How do you do this? Well, the good Lord opened the pathway, and an answer came to me. And the answer is in the book. And basically, to truncate it, I said, all right, Gabe, here's the truth as I know it to be. Lots of things that we now think of as everyday, commonplace, mundane, long time ago, people thought were miracles and magic. Like fire was magic and a miracle, but now we control fire, right? And all kinds of creatures that used to be on this planet are now gone. We know about dinosaurs and dodos and all the animals that are extinct. I said, well, what I understood is that long time ago, a lot of the magical creatures also existed. The ogres and the wizards and the witches and the fairies and whatever, And as people became more sophisticated, they took over the magic for themselves, and the magical creatures had nothing to do, so they would leave. And of course, when the fairies started to leave, children were very upset that the tooth fairies were leaving because, they were their special friends. And I said, the story that I heard is that the last little tooth fairy, before they left, because the children were so sad, said, well, I'll tell you what. When you lose a tooth, as long as you believe in us, your parents will come into your room and they'll take the tooth and they'll go and they'll sit in a special place, And if they close their eyes, we will tell them what to do or tell them what to say to you. And we will do that as long as you believe in us. And I said, so the honest answer, Gabe, to your question is when you lose a tooth, I come into your room and I take the tooth from under your pillow and I go to my desk and I sit down and I have a pen and I have the paper. And I close my eyes and I hear the words in my head and I write them down to you. And then I put it under your pillow. But what I can't tell you is whether I'm writing those words out of my imagination or if the voice of some tooth fairy is speaking to me and I'm just receiving it. I don't know. And I said, frankly, the only person that can answer that is you. You have to decide what it is. And he went away, and he woke up the next day, and he came downstairs, and he said, I thought about it. And he said, I would prefer to believe that I have this magical person in my life, this Gwyneth person. So when he lost that tooth, and the letter that Gwyneth wrote him when he lost that tooth is in the book, and it basically says, Gabe, I have given you many gifts, but you've given yourself the best one of all possibilities, and just commended him for that. And so I told the story to a friend of mine, and she said, you've got to write that down. I went, I do? Really? Why? She said, no, it's great. You got to write it down. So I kid you not, Alec, I know great children's books writers, they labor over every word as if they were Dostoevsky, but I wrote that story I just told you in about 15 minutes. I gave it to an agent at my agency. I said, you're not going to be able to do anything with this, but, here it is. And Scholastic came back and said, we will do this book. And they hooked me up with the illustrator, and the book went out, and it won a Scholastic Readers Award. And, it did very well. But that was an absolute true story. And that is really an example of what my wife and I, the kind of parents my wife and I tried to be on our best days, was to give our kids the ability to think for themselves and to give them possibilities. It's a great gift.
Yeah, it's a great gift and an awesome message, Jason. I love now that it's a staple, I think, for the children's book collection. So really good stuff. And Jason, obviously your legacy here as an actor is very secured here. You're, like it or not, you're going to be George Costanza, and that's really I think a pretty good role to be remembered for. Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be as a dad?
Well, it's really interesting. Years ago, a couple friends of mine were getting stars on the Walk of Fame. And when Julia Louis-Dreyfus got hers, I went and I was part of the presentation for her. And I came home, and my boys, I guess they were young teenagers at the point, and they said, hey, Dad, do you have one of those? I went, nope. And they said, don't you want one? I said, well, I never really thought about it. I said, I suppose if I wanted one bad enough, I could get it. It's not hard. You have to get somebody to nominate you, and then you basically pay for them. Somebody pays for them, basically. I said, but guys, I could walk you up there, and we'll walk down block after block after block, and every one of those people were famous. At the moment that star got laid in the sidewalk, they were famous. And I guarantee you won't know every 9 out of 10. You will not know. Fame is a very fleeting thing. I said, when I am gone, there are only 2 people in the world who I care how they remember me and if they remember me, and I'm looking at both of them. And I don't need a star on a sidewalk for you guys to know who I am. And that is true. I would like the boys to hold me in their heart as someone who adored them, so they know what it is to be adored, who supported them, who believed in them, who would always try to be there for them in any way if needed. My parents, God bless them, they were working parents. I was a latchkey kid. My parents weren't there more than they were there. And my parents were a generation behind state-of-the-art parenting. So they made some mistakes in my mind. But what I know is my parents adored me with every cell in their body, every fiber of their being. And that knowledge is what I carry. All the other stuff, when they weren't there, what they couldn't do, the things they may have made mistakes about, none of that carries weight with me at this point. What I hold is I was loved by my parents. That's all my boys need to have. If that's the legacy I can leave them, we're good.
Yeah, very, very well said, Jason. And what kind of, turning the page forward here, what kind of project? I know we're coming off a year where difficult with the pandemic. It affected everybody. What kind of I know hey, listen, they just did the Friends reunion. Do you guys have any kind of if you drop any info on a Seinfeld reunion, it could really blow up the podcast here. But what kind of projects? what kind of projects or goals you have coming up for yourself here?
It's been busy. I do a lot of live entertaining. I tour. I have a show I do with symphonies. I have almost like a stand-up but Q&A stand-up show that I do. I've been doing that all during the pandemic because that's easy to do in this format. Not the symphony show so much. It's hard to sing with a symphony orchestra over Zoom. But I have projects for the stage as a director that are supposed to. There's all three of them are in New York, and hopefully our Broadway have a future on Broadway. I have a television show that's in development. I have as a performer, I have another television show in development as a producer. There's a lot, but the thing that I've been doing the most, Alec, through the pandemic, and that I think is going to stay a significant part of my life, is teaching young actors. I've enjoyed it as much, if not more, than some of the greatest jobs I've had in my career. So I think teaching, as you get to be an older actor, some of us stay really vital, and some of us go, well, our best days are behind us. I don't know which way it's going to go. I still have many things happening and lots of opportunities, and I don't know why I keep making an ungodly living, but I do, and thank you for everything up there that's happening. But if it all ended tomorrow and I, just had time with my family and time to teach, and I have some other little hobbies and time to be with the people I care about, it's been a great ride. I got no issues. Nothing wrong with that. So if good things come along and the audiences get to see them, great. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. And if the last time anybody sees my face in public is this conversation, that's okay too.
Hey, listen, awesome stuff. Listen, what a blessing it is to so many young actors to have somebody like yourself there to show them the ropes. So good for you for doing that and giving back. And the last thing I want to hit you with here, Jason, I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
You can't bank enough sleep. I will tell you that right now. Here's the thing that you're going to want to remember. And you won't know it in the moment, but you'll remember it later. When the kids are little, it is so much work. Man, it asks for everything you got. You're up in the middle of the night. You're literally wiping people's butts. You're providing for everything they've got. You are sacrificing opportunity, money, you name it. It's all about your kids. And there are days where you go, God, I'm weary from this. Where am I? Where do I get to be in all of this? I will tell you, mine are 29 and 25, and I can't watch easily videos of them as the little kids, not because of anything other than I go, I miss them so much. I would put myself right back there, and I know how hard it was. I know how exhausting it was. But that time where you can pick your child up and make the world better for them and you, that lasts a moment. And when you're in it, you don't really appreciate it as much as you should. When it's gone, and they're big guys and they don't need you to do that stuff anymore, you're going to miss. That's why grandparents go crazy, because they get it back. And so at the hardest moment in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. when the kid is screaming and you don't know what he wants, just hang in there, because you're gonna look back at that and go, that was such sweet time.
Yeah, very well said, Jason. I love the message. This has been an honor for me. I got to say, Jason Alexander, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here at First Class Father.
Thanks, Alec. Keep the flame lit, brother.